The call came at 7:43 in the morning, on a Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday. Gray sky pressing down on the city, coffee going cold on the counter, and a house full of people who thought they already knew the shape of their lives. Marcus Calloway was at his desk on the second floor when his phone lit up with a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail. He had a meeting in 11 minutes, a quarterly report open on his laptop, and the particular kind of controlled exhaustion that comes from raising a child alone while running a company that never sleeps. But something made him pick up. That same instinct that had made him a good father before money made him a busy one. "Mr. Calloway?" The voice on the other end was careful, professional, the kind of careful that means something has gone wrong. "This is St. Catherine's Medical Center. We have a patient here, Elena Reyes. She's listed you as her emergency contact." Marcus went still. His hand tightened around the phone. "She collapsed this morning during a follow-up procedure." A pause. "She's stable, but we need someone here. There are some circumstances that her attending physician would like to discuss with her family. Or in this case, with you." Marcus didn't say much. He wrote down the room number, set his phone face down on the desk, and stared at the wall for a long moment. Outside the door, he could hear the house beginning to breathe the sound of his daughter Sophia shuffling down the hallway in her slippers, the familiar creak of the third step on the staircase that nobody had ever fixed. He could hear Mrs. Abra, the weekend cook, humming something low and tuneless in the kitchen below. But Elena wasn't humming. Elena wasn't anywhere in the house. And Marcus realized, sitting there with his quarterly report still glowing on the screen, that in 5 years of waking up to a home that ran smoothly hot meals, laundered sheets, Sophia's school lunches packed with the exact crust-off-the-bread precision his daughter required, he had never once stopped to ask Elena Reyes what she was carrying on her own. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The first time Elena Reyes walked through the service entrance of the Calloway estate, she carried a single canvas tote bag, a folded reference letter from her previous employer, and the particular posture of a woman who has learned not to take up too much space. She was 31 years old. Her shoes were clean, but the left heel was wearing thin. Her hair was pulled back with a clip that matched nothing functional, not decorative. The estate sat at the end of a long private road in the kind of neighborhood where the hedges were trimmed every Tuesday, and nobody ever seemed to be outside enjoying any of it. 6 bedrooms. A kitchen that cost more than most people earned in a year. A garden that bloomed in organized, obedient rows like it had been threatened into beauty. Marcus Calloway had built all of it from a logistics company he started at 27, scaled through relentless, methodical work, and never quite learned to enjoy the way people enjoyed things when they weren't afraid of losing them. He was a widower. His wife, Catherine, had died 3 years before Elena arrived, a brain aneurysm, sudden and total, on an otherwise unremarkable Wednesday morning. She had been 34. She had been the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday without keeping a list, who could make a stranger feel like an old friend in under 10 minutes, and who had left behind a 5-year-old daughter named Sophia that Marcus now faced alone every single morning, terrified he was going to love her wrong. Elena met Sophia on her second day. The little girl appeared at the kitchen doorway while Elena was wiping down the countertops, a small, serious child in a yellow cardigan, holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear flattened from years of being slept on. She studied Elena the way children study things they're not sure are safe yet. "Are you the new one?" Sophia asked. Elena looked up without flinching. "I suppose I am." Sophia considered this. The last one didn't know how to make the rabbit smell right after washing. Elena set down her cloth. "What does he need to smell like?" Sophia held the rabbit up. "Lavender. Not the spray kind. The real kind." Elena nodded seriously. "I'll remember." Sophia watched her for another moment, then stepped back into the hallway and disappeared. Elena stood there alone in that enormous kitchen and felt something shift, something small and specific and real. She thought about her own daughter. She thought about how much a child can tell you about the kind of house you're walking into just by the way they ask a question. She stayed. 5 years is a long time to be invisible to someone. Marcus Calloway was not a cruel man. That needs to be said clearly, because the story of how a kind man can miss an entire truth happening inside his own walls is not the story of a monster. It is the story of someone looking at what he expected to see every single day, until looking became automatic and seeing became unnecessary. He saw a woman who kept his household functioning. He saw efficiency, reliability, a quiet presence that never demanded explanation. He said good morning, sometimes asked about her weekend, signed the paycheck every month without thinking about it. What he didn't see, what no one had pointed him toward, was the life Elena Reyes was living in the margins of his. She lived 40 minutes away by bus in a one-bedroom apartment she shared with her younger brother, Raphael, who had spent the last 2 years slowly losing the use of his legs to a degenerative nerve condition that their insurance covered incompletely and their savings covered not at all. The medical bills arrived with the reliable cruelty of utility statements. Elena paid what she could, deferred what she couldn't, and showed up to the Calloway estate every Monday through Friday at 7 in the morning looking like someone who had slept the full 8 hours, because she understood that a woman in her position could not afford to look like she was drowning. She managed it. She had always managed it. That was the thing about Elena Reyes that nobody thought to say out loud. She was the kind of person who made survival look so dignified that the people around her forgot she was surviving. Into this house, 3 years after Elena arrived, came Diana Paris. Diana was Catherine's younger sister. 40 years old, unmarried, the kind of beautiful that required constant maintenance and expressed itself as a permanent mild grievance at the world. She had arrived initially under the banner of family support. Marcus had invited her to stay for a month after a particularly hard stretch when Sophia's blood condition had flared and the child was in and out of hospital twice. In 8 weeks, Diana had shown up with designer luggage and a soft, sympathetic voice, and she had never quite left. She had her own wing of the house now. She had opinions about the menu and the garden schedule. She had the particular authority of someone who has decided that proximity to grief gives them the right to rearrange things. And she had, from the very first week, a specific and focused discomfort with Elena Reyes that she expressed not through shouting. Diana was too polished for shouting, but through the kind of quiet, patient erosion that leaves marks nobody can point to. It began with small corrections. Elena, the windows in the east sitting room need to go down an inch more. Elena, when Mr. Calloway has guests, please use the back staircase. Elena, I don't want Sophia unsupervised in the kitchen when you're cleaning in there. She picks things up, you understand. Elena understood. She lowered the windows. She used the back staircase. She said yes, ma'am, without inflection, and she returned to her work with the kind of steadiness that frustrated Diana because there was nothing to push back against. You can't win an argument with a woman who refuses to start one. But Diana wasn't trying to win an argument. She was trying to make Elena small. And slowly, methodically, she was trying to make Marcus notice that smallness, to look at this woman who had been in his home for 3 years and begin, finally, to see a liability instead of a gift. The campaign was subtle enough that even Elena didn't fully grasp its shape until the morning she arrived to find Sophia sitting alone at the kitchen table, untouched breakfast in front of her, crying silently in the way children cry when they've been told that crying loudly is not allowed. Elena set down her bag. She sat across from Sophia without being asked. She didn't touch her, didn't rush toward the tears. She just sat there present, unhurried, until Sophia looked up. Aunt Diana said I'm too old to carry Barnaby to school, Sophia said. Barnaby was the rabbit. His lavender ear had long since been fixed. Elena looked at the rabbit sitting beside the cereal bowl. How old is too old? Sophia's chin trembled. She said 8. Elena considered this for a moment, the way you consider something that is both wrong and important. Then she said, carefully, you can keep Barnaby at home and still carry him in your heart. That's the deal veterans make with the things they love. Sophia blinked. What's a veteran? Someone who's been brave long enough to know the difference between putting something down and letting it go. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her spoon. Elena stood, retrieved her cloth, and began wiping down the stovetop. She didn't look at Sophia again. She didn't need to. She had learned, in 5 years in this house, that sometimes the kindest thing you can offer a child is the dignity of not making a performance of their pain. From the hallway, Diana watched through the doorway with an expression that had nothing to do with concern and everything to do with calculation. She turned and walked away before Elena could see her. That evening, Diana mentioned to Marcus over dinner that she found Elena a little too informal with Sophia. She sits with her, Diana said, tone light, careful. At the kitchen table. Like they're friends. She smiled. I know she means well. But there's a line, isn't there? Between warmth and overstepping. Marcus looked up from his plate. Elena's been with us for 3 years. Sophia is comfortable with her. Diana lifted her wine glass. Of course. I just think Sophia is getting older. She needs to understand certain boundaries. It's better for her to know who the adults in charge are. She set the glass down. Don't you think? Marcus said nothing. But the word boundaries settled somewhere in the back of his mind like a seed waiting for the right season. What Marcus did not know, what no one in that house knew yet, was that Elena Reyes had been to St. Catherine's Medical Center 4 times in the past 18 months. Not for Raphael. For Sophia. It had begun 2 years ago, when Sophia's blood condition, a rare inherited disorder that required periodic specialized treatment, had entered a more acute phase. The medical team had explained to Marcus that the most effective long-term intervention would be a procedure requiring a matched donor. The donor pool was narrow. The match criteria were specific. They had entered Sophia's profile into the registry and settled in to wait. Elena had overheard the conversation through a door she had been about to knock on. She had stood in the hallway with her hand raised, not breathing, listening to Marcus's voice and the doctor's voice talking about his daughter's future in the careful, cushioned language of people who want to deliver bad news without dropping it. She had walked away without knocking. She had gone home that evening on the 40-minute bus ride, and she had sat across from Raphael, who was watching television with his legs stretched on the cushions because standing was difficult now. And she had thought about what it means to be invisible in a place truly invisible, in the way service renders you, and how sometimes invisibility is also a kind of permission. The next morning she called the donor registry. She was tested. The results came back 3 weeks later, a near-perfect match. The odds of such a match occurring outside biological family were medically remarkable. Elena had sat with that word remarkable for a long time. Then she had signed the consent forms. She told no one. Not Raphael. Not a single person inside the Calloway house. She had taken 2 days off from work citing a family matter, had undergone the first procedure, and returned to the estate on Thursday morning with a small bruise on the inside of her left arm that she covered with her sleeve. Sophia's treatment had proceeded. The doctors had noted significant improvement in their follow-up reports. Elena had listened to Marcus on the phone with the specialist. The results are incredible. They've never seen a response this strong. And she had continued folding the laundry in the room next door, quiet, invisible, and completely steady. She went back a second time 8 months later when Sophia's markers shifted and a second procedure was recommended. She booked the appointment on her lunch break. She arranged for Raphael's care for the 2 days she'd be recovering. She told the hospital to use Marcus Calloway's number as her emergency contact, not because she expected anything to come of it, but because she had no one else to list. Her own phone was a prepaid that sometimes ran out of minutes. Raphael's care facility had its own number. There was no one else. She had not anticipated collapsing. She had not anticipated that the complications from the second procedure would land her in a hospital bed at 7 in the morning with a nurse dialing a number that would send a shockwave through a house where everyone had been very carefully looking in the wrong direction. Marcus Calloway put on his coat and told his assistant to reschedule the meeting. He drove to St. Catherine's alone, in a silence that felt less like quiet and more like the moment before something irreversible happens, when you can feel the ground shifting under you and you haven't yet decided whether to run or to stand still and let the truth come. He parked. He walked through the glass doors. He gave the name at the front desk. And then he was shown to a room where Elena Reyes lay in a hospital bed looking smaller than he had ever seen her. And a doctor he didn't know was waiting to explain something that was going to reframe every single thing Marcus thought he understood about the last 2 years of his family's life. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Elena's eyes were closed. Her hands were folded over the blanket in the composed, deliberate way she did everything like she was managing the situation, even when the situation had taken her completely off guard. Marcus looked at this woman he had seen every day for 5 years and understood, with the particular nausea of a man confronting his own blindness, that he had never actually looked at her at all. The doctor stepped forward. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "thank you for coming. There are some things about your daughter's treatment that I think you deserve to know." The doctor's name was Brennan. He was the kind of man who delivered difficult information without decoration, not cold, but precise, the way a surgeon is precise. because imprecision in moments like this costs people something they can never get back. He shook Marcus's hand. He gestured to the chair beside Elena's bed and waited while Marcus sat, still in his coat, still holding his car keys without realizing it. Then Dr. Brennan opened a folder and set it on his knee and said, simply, "I want to start at the beginning so that what I tell you next makes sense." Marcus nodded. "Your daughter Sophia has been receiving treatment for her condition for the past 2 years. You know that. What you may not know is the nature of the donor material that made her most recent intervention successful." Dr. Brennan paused. "We were fortunate enough to identify a match through the voluntary registry. The donor underwent the first procedure approximately 22 months ago. The second, 8 months after that." He looked at Marcus steadily. "The donor's name is Elena Reyes." The room didn't move. The monitors continued their patient, rhythmic beeping. Somewhere down the hall a door opened and closed. Marcus sat very still with his car keys in his hand and felt the floor of everything he understood tilt sideways. She stopped. He looked at Elena. Her eyes were still closed. The bruise on her inner arm, the one she had covered with her sleeve in the 2 days before this morning, the one he never would have noticed anyway, because he had stopped looking, was visible now above the hospital bracelet. He stared at it for a long moment. "She never told me." "No," Dr. Brennan said. "She was explicit about that. She asked us not to disclose her identity to the family. Standard anonymous donor protocol. We honored that." He folded his hands over the folder. "The reason I'm telling you now is that the complication she experienced this morning, a reaction to the second procedure that we should have caught earlier, required us to contact her emergency listing, which is you. And ethically, in a situation where the donor's health is at risk and the family benefiting from the donation is present," he paused, "I felt you had the right to understand the full picture." Marcus turned back to Elena. He looked at the careful, deliberate arrangement of her hands. He looked at the line of her jaw, composed even in sleep, as if she was managing something even now. He thought about 5 years of 7 in the morning arrivals. He thought about Sophia's school lunches with the crusts removed. He thought about the quarterly report still open on his laptop at home, and felt something enormous and wordless move through him, the specific grief of a man realizing how wrong he has been about the size of someone's life. "How much risk?" he said. His voice came out lower than he expected. Dr. Brennan was honest. "The reaction is manageable. She'll need 2 to 3 days here. There may be some residual fatigue over the following weeks. Long-term, no lasting complications, provided she rests and follows the protocol." He hesitated. "But I want to be direct with you, Mr. Calloway. The second procedure was physically demanding. The recovery window she gave herself before returning to work was," he chose his words carefully, "shorter than we would have recommended." Marcus absorbed this. She had gone back to work. She had gone back to his house, to his kitchen, to Sophia's lavender-scented rabbit and Diana's instructions about the back staircase. And she had done it with a body that was still healing from something she had done for his daughter. Anonymously, without asking. He set his car keys on the side table. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and put his face in his hands for just a moment. One private, unmeasured moment before pulling himself back. "What does she need?" he said. Dr. Brennan gave him the list. Marcus wrote it down. Then he sat in the chair beside Elena's bed for another 20 minutes without speaking, watching her breathe with the same steadiness she brought to everything. And he tried to understand how a person carries something this large without anyone in the room ever noticing the weight. When Elena opened her eyes, she found him there. She blinked once, twice, the slow resurfacing of someone returning from deep water. Then she saw Marcus, and her expression did something he had never seen it do in 5 years. It went uncertain. Not afraid. Not ashamed. Uncertain, like a woman who has been found in possession of something she had decided belonged only to herself. "Mr. Calloway." Her voice was rough. "Elena." He didn't move. Didn't stand. Just kept his elbows on his knees and looked at her directly. "Dr. Brennan told me." A pause. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at him. "I see." "Why?" he said. One word. He wasn't asking it the way a man asks when he's angry. He was asking it the way a man asks when he genuinely cannot locate the answer anywhere inside his own understanding of the world. Elena was quiet for so long that the monitor filled the silence 3 full cycles before she spoke. "Because she needed someone," she said finally. "And I matched." She turned her head toward the window. It's not more complicated than that. It is more complicated than that, Marcus said, gently. You risked your health. Twice. You took 2 days off work that you told me were for a family matter and came here instead, and then came back and said nothing. Elena's jaw shifted. My brother is my family matter, she said. I didn't lie. No, he agreed. You didn't lie. He stopped. He looked at his hands. You made yourself invisible. Again. At that, Elena turned back from the window. Something moved across her face, not offense, not relief, but a kind of recognition. As if he had named something correctly for the first time. People in my position learn to be useful without being seen, she said. That's the transaction. Her voice was even. Not bitter. Just factual in the way that facts become when you've carried them long enough. I didn't do this for gratitude. I didn't do it expecting anything to change. Sophia is a good child, and she deserved a chance, and I could give her one. She looked at him steadily. So I did. Marcus said nothing for a long time. Outside the window, the city continued its ordinary morning. A bus pulled away from a stop. Someone walked a dog. The gray sky had not changed. I'm going to make some arrangements, he said at last, standing slowly. For your brother. For your apartment. I need some time to think about what the right thing to do is, but I want you to know that I understand that whatever I do, it won't be enough. And I'm not going to pretend it is. Elena watched him. You don't owe me anything. I know that, Marcus said. That's the point. He picked up his car keys. He paused at the door, and for just a moment he looked like what he was, a man who had been running a careful, managed life and had just discovered that the ground under it had been held up by someone he'd never properly seen. Then he walked out, and the door swung shut behind him with the soft, definitive click of something that cannot be undone. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. He drove home with both hands on the wheel and nothing on the radio. The 40-minute route from St. Catharines back to the estate was one he usually covered on the phone, emails, calls, the endless maintenance of a company that didn't care what was happening inside his chest. Today he drove it in silence and let himself feel the full weight of what had been living in his house without his knowledge. He was still in that silence when he turned through the gate and saw Diana's car parked at an angle he recognized. Not the angle of someone who had parked quickly in an emergency, but the angle of someone who had parked with enough carelessness to communicate ownership. He sat in the driveway for a moment. Then he went inside. Diana was in the kitchen. She had a coffee and a phone and the particular energy of a woman who has decided that a morning without the housekeeper is a morning to redecorate her authority. She looked up when Marcus walked in, read something in his face, and set the phone down. You went to the hospital, she said. Statement, not question. Her expression arranged itself into something careful. How is she? Is it serious? She'll recover, Marcus said. He took off his coat and set it over the back of a chair. He filled a glass of water and stood at the counter drinking it, looking at the kitchen, at the windows that went down exactly an inch, at the back staircase door that Elena used now, at the table where he knew now with absolute certainty Sophia sometimes sat crying while Diana's instructions hung in the air above her like weather. Good, Diana said. I'm glad she'll be all right. A pause, perfectly calibrated. I suppose this gives you a chance to think about the arrangement, though. She's been unreliable lately, the days off. That there was something last week. Marcus, I didn't want to bother you with it, but she left Sophia alone in the garden for almost 20 minutes while Diana. His voice was quiet. Flat. The kind of flat that has removed everything from it deliberately. Diana stopped. He turned around. He looked at her, really looked at her, with the particular attention he had just spent 50 minutes learning to apply, and said, What did you actually see? Diana blinked. I just told you. She left Sophia. Sophia told me last week that Elena had stayed in the garden with her for the entire afternoon, teaching her the names of the plants your sister planted along the back wall. He set down the glass. All of them. Catherine's plants. The ones you told me were overgrown and should be cut back. He watched Diana's face. Which one of those is the version where Elena left her alone? A pause that lasted precisely long enough to be significant. Diana recovered quickly. She always recovered quickly. It was one of her most reliable features. She softened her expression, tilted her head, reached for the register of wounded reasonableness. Marcus, I'm only trying to protect. Don't say protect, he said. Same quiet. Same flat. I've heard that word used to cover too many things in the last 5 years. Diana set her mug down. Her eyes changed. The warmth that lived on the surface of everything she did receded, and what was underneath it was something older and harder, the specific resentment of a woman who had decided that proximity to her dead sister's life entitled her to a version of it. "You're upset," she said. "You've had a difficult morning. I understand that. But I want you to think carefully before I what?" Marcus asked. Diana pressed her lips together. Said nothing. Marcus leaned against the counter with his arms crossed, not aggressively, but with the stillness of a man who has made a decision and is waiting for the conversation to catch up to it. "I've been thinking carefully for years," he said. "I've been careful with this house, with Sophia, with what I let close to her, and what I kept away. And the one thing I should have been careful about, the one thing I let through the door, because it came with Catherine's face, I didn't look at closely enough." Diana's chin came up. "That's a cruel thing to say." "It's a true thing," Marcus said. "And you told me that those two things were the same." A long silence stretched between them. Diana picked up her phone, set it down again, looked at the window, looked back. "What exactly did the hospital tell you?" she said. "Enough," Marcus replied. And the way he said it, quiet, total, final, told Diana that the part of her campaign where she moved chess pieces invisibly was over. Whatever was in that hospital had been seen. And a man who had spent the morning learning what real protection looks like was standing in his kitchen looking at her with the particular, terrible clarity of someone who would never again let comfortable looking replace actual seeing. That afternoon, Sophia came home from school and set her bag down at the door the way she always did, with a thud that traveled through the floorboards and announced her arrival 2 seconds before she appeared. She went to the kitchen first, the way she always did, looking for Elena. The kitchen was empty. Sophia stood in the doorway for a moment. She looked at the clean counters, the arrangement of the dish towel on its hook the particular way. Elena always folded it, not in thirds the way the instructions said, but in half, and then half again, so the embroidered edge faced out, because Sophia had once said she liked the flower on it. It was folded that way now. Habit. Care. The room holding the shape of someone who wasn't in it. Sophia went to find her father. She found him in the study, standing at the window, not looking at anything in particular. She stood beside him and looked at the same window. This was something she and Marcus had always done, stood next to each other facing the same direction, in the way that sometimes makes talking easier than looking at each other's faces. "Is Elena sick?" Sophia asked. Marcus looked down at her. "She's resting. She'll be back." Sophia nodded slowly. "Aunt Diana said she probably won't come back." Something moved across Marcus's face. He controlled it. "When did she say that?" "At lunch." Sophia picked at the edge of her sleeve. "She said sometimes people who work in houses think they're part of the family when really they're just employees, and that it's better to understand that sooner." Marcus crouched down. He was eye level with his daughter, and Sophia looked back at him with Catherine's eyes, the same directness, the same refusal to look anywhere other than exactly at the thing. "Sophia," he said, "has Aunt Diana ever made you feel like you couldn't talk to me?" Sophia considered this with the seriousness of a child who has been given a real question by an adult and intends to answer it honestly. "She says you're busy," she said, "that you don't need us putting our small problems on your big problems." She paused. "She says Elena is a small problem." Marcus stayed crouched. He didn't move. He let that settle in him the way cold water settles all the way down, to every part that had been holding warmth through assumption and distraction and misplaced trust. "Elena," he said, voice even, "is not a small problem." Sophia blinked. "Then what is she?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. He thought about a hospital room. He thought about a folder on a doctor's knee. He thought about the bruise on the inside of a left arm and a woman who had held it under her sleeve and gone back to work and said nothing. "She's the reason," he said finally, "that I'm going to do better." Sophia reached over and patted his arm the way she sometimes patted Barnaby once, firmly, with absolute conviction. Then she went to do her homework, leaving Marcus there at the window in the fading afternoon light. With the full architecture of a lie he hadn't known, he was living finally spread out in front of him, where he could see every piece of it. He needed to see Elena again. He needed to tell her not with the right words, because there were no right words, but with something concrete, something real, something that cost him the same order of thing that her choices had cost her. But first, he needed to address what was living in the east wing of his house. Because Diana Paris had had 5 years in which to build her infrastructure quietly, and Marcus had just spent 5 years looking in the wrong direction, and the distance between those two facts had been wide enough for a woman to slip through and rearrange his family without him ever noticing. That was going to stop. Tonight. He turned from the window. The house was quiet in the particular way it went quiet in the hour before dinner. The suspended, held-breath quality of a home waiting to find out what kind of evening it would be. From somewhere upstairs came the soft sound of Sophia's pencil moving across paper. From the east wing, nothing. Diana was in her room, waiting, calculating her next move the way she always calculated, with patience and precision and the absolute confidence of someone who had never been fully confronted. That confidence, Marcus understood now, had always depended on his not looking. He walked toward the east wing. His footsteps were steady. His hands were at his sides. He raised his fist and knocked. Diana opened the door on the second knock. She had changed out of her morning clothes. That detail registered immediately, the way small, deliberate choices always register when you finally started paying attention. She was dressed as if she expected company. Composed. Perfumed. Holding a glass of water with the practiced ease of someone who has decided the best posture for this conversation is casual. Marcus. She stepped back to let him in, already controlling the geography of the room. He didn't move. He stayed in the doorway. That, too, was a choice. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to hear it without answering me until I'm finished. Can you do that?" Diana's eyes flickered. She recognized the register, the particular quiet of a man who has stopped negotiating. She set the water glass on the dresser. "Of course," she said. Marcus looked at her steadily. "You have been in this house for 3 years," he said. "I invited you here because you are Catherine's sister and because I thought Sophia needed family close to her. Those two things are still true. They will always be true." He paused. "But I've been confusing family with trust. And I've been confusing presence with goodness. And those are my mistakes, not yours. I own them." Diana's expression held. She was very good at holding expressions. "What I am not going to own," Marcus continued, "is what you've done with the access I gave you. The way you've spoken to Sophia. The way you've managed what she tells me and what she doesn't. The way you've used the word protection as a curtain in front of something that has nothing to do with protection." He held her gaze. "I know you told her I don't need her small problems. I know you told her Elena is a small problem. I know you've been working, quietly and consistently, to make the person who has held this household together look like a liability, because she made you feel the one thing you cannot tolerate feeling." Diana's composure cracked. Just once, just briefly, like light through a shutter. "And what is that?" "Unnecessary," Marcus said. The word landed. Diana looked away toward the window, not because there was anything to look at, but because it was the only place to put her face while she recollected herself. When she turned back, the warmth was entirely gone. What remained was something honest, at least the clean, hard kernel of a woman who had wanted something and had not gotten it. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Elena Reyes works for you. She is not your family. She is not Sophia's family. She cleans your house, and she is very good at making you feel that she is indispensable. And one day you are going to look back. She donated bone marrow for my daughter," Marcus said. "Twice. Anonymously. She recovered from the second procedure and came back to work here before her own body had finished healing. She never asked me for a single thing. Not a word. Not a look of recognition." He let that sit. "Tell me again what she is." Diana said nothing. The glass of water sat on the dresser. Outside, a car moved slowly down the private road. The house held its breath. "I'd like you to be gone by the weekend," Marcus said. Not loudly. Not cruelly. The way you state a fact that does not require amplification. "I'll arrange for your things to be delivered anywhere you need them to go. You'll always be Sophia's aunt. That doesn't change. But this," he gestured, once, at the room, the wing, the 3 years of accumulated tenure, "this is finished." Diana picked up her water glass, set it down again, looked at the portrait of Catherine that she had placed on the wall of her room, the only photograph of her sister she had brought with her, and the thing that had given her more authority in this house than anything she had ever said or done. She looked at it for a long time. "She would have wanted me here," Diana said quietly. The anger had drained out of her voice. What was left was something smaller and sadder and more real than anything she had shown him in 3 years. Catherine would have wanted family close to Sophia. "Yes," Marcus said. "She would have. But Catherine would never have called any person in her house a small problem. He looked at his sister-in-law with the kind of clarity that comes after the anger has finished and only the truth remains. She would never have made a child feel that calling her father was a burden. You know that. Diana's throat moved. For just a moment, she looked like what she actually was, a woman who had lost her sister and never found the right shape for her grief, and had tried to fill it with control, because control was something you could do something about. It did not excuse a single thing she had done. But Marcus looked at it and let himself see it fully, because he had been practicing, that day, the discipline of seeing things completely. He stepped back from the doorway. "Good night, Diana," he said. He pulled the door closed softly behind him. He stood in the hallway for a moment, alone, in the particular silence that follows the most important decisions, not triumphant, not relieved, just still. Then he walked back down the hall to the room where the light was on and his daughter was doing her homework, and he knocked on that door instead, and went in and sat on the edge of her bed and talked to her for an hour about nothing and everything. The way fathers and daughters talk, when they have remembered that time is not something you can schedule. Sophia fell asleep with her hand curled around Barnaby's repaired ear. Marcus turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, and felt the particular weight of gratitude that has no clean object to settle on, gratitude that is too large for one person, too entangled with luck and loss, and the inexplicable mercy of a stranger who matched. He went back downstairs. He sat at the kitchen table, not the desk, not the study, the kitchen table, where Elena always set his morning coffee in the particular spot that caught the east light, and he opened his laptop. But he didn't open the quarterly report. He opened a different document. He started writing down the things he was going to do. Specific things. Real things. The kind that cost something. He wrote for a long time. Elena was discharged from St. Catherine's on a Thursday morning. Dr. Brennan had been clear. 2 more weeks of reduced activity, no heavy lifting, medication for the next 10 days, and a follow-up appointment she was not to skip. Elena had listened to all of this with the attentiveness she brought to every set of instructions, asked 2 precise questions about Raphael's care schedule and whether her commute would affect the recovery timeline, and then reached for her coat. The nurse who came to discharge her mentioned that her transportation had already been arranged. Elena looked up. "I didn't arrange transportation. Mr. Calloway called this morning," the nurse said, with the gentle, unreadable neutrality of hospital staff who have seen many versions of this kind of story. "There's a car outside." Elena sat still for a moment. She looked at the window. Then she stood, put on her coat, and walked out. The car was not a taxi. It was Marcus's own car, with Marcus in it, sitting in the passenger pickup lane with the engine on and his hands resting on his knees, and the expression of a man who has rehearsed something and then decided at the last moment to abandon the rehearsal. Elena got in. She did not say thank you immediately. She looked at him first, the way she had always quietly looked at things before deciding what they were. "Sophia's at school?" she asked. "Until 3, Marcus said." Elena nodded. She fastened her seatbelt. He pulled out of the lot, and neither of them spoke for several minutes. The city moved past the windows. A bus. A woman with a stroller. An ordinary Thursday in a world that had been reorganized overnight, without anyone outside this car knowing it. "Diana is leaving," Marcus said. "She'll be gone by Saturday." Elena absorbed this. "Because of me?" "No," Marcus said. "Because of her." He kept his eyes on the road. "You just made it impossible for me to keep not seeing it." Elena looked out the passenger window. Her hands were folded in her lap, the same composed arrangement as the hospital bed, as every surface she had ever sat on in 5 years of making herself organized and containable and manageable. She was quiet for long enough that the next set of traffic lights cycled twice. "I want to talk about Raphael," Marcus said finally. Elena turned. The composure shifted just slightly, just enough for him to catch it. "I made some calls yesterday," Marcus said. "There's a specialist, Dr. Kwan, at Mercy General. He runs a neurological rehabilitation program, not theoretical, active. He's been getting results with cases like Raphael's. I've spoken to his office. They have an opening next month." He paused. "It's not charity. I want to be clear about that. It is what is owed." He glanced at her once, quickly, before returning to the road. "You gave my daughter a future. I would like to give your brother a fighting chance at one." Elena's throat moved. She looked at her folded hands. She looked at them for a long time. "He doesn't know," she said. Her voice was careful. About any of it. He'd have tried to stop me. I know, Marcus said. I figured. He's proud, she said. Sometimes pride is all you have left when your body starts. She stopped, pressed her lips together, then said quietly, he would have told me not to do it. And you would have done it anyway, Marcus said. Not a question. Elena didn't answer. But the answer lived in the silence, clear as anything. They drove the rest of the way without speaking, and the quiet between them was different from the quiet of 5 years, not the managed, professional silence of employer and employee, each staying in the lane assigned to them, but something wider. The silence of two people who have looked at each other clearly, maybe for the first time, and found that what is. There is not what they expected and not less than what they needed. When they pulled through the gate, Marcus parked and came around to her side. Elena was already opening the door herself. She was the kind of woman who opens her own door, but she let him hold it, which was its own small thing. The house looked the same from the outside. It always looked the same from the outside. But when Elena stepped through the service entrance out of habit, and then stood in the narrow entryway with her hand on the doorframe, Marcus stepped past her and opened the main door instead. The front door. Wide. Come in this way, he said. Elena looked at the open door. She looked at Marcus. She looked at the door again. Then she walked through it. The house was quiet in the mid-morning way that houses are quiet when their people are elsewhere and the rooms are simply waiting. The kitchen caught the east light. The coffee was already made. Marcus had made it before he left for the hospital, an automatic gesture that had become, in its small way, intentional. He poured 2 cups and set them on the kitchen table and sat down, and Elena sat across from him. And it was so ordinary and so completely different from anything that had ever happened in that kitchen that they both sat with it for a moment before speaking. I don't know how to do this exactly, Marcus said. He wrapped both hands around his mug. I've been managing things for a long time. My company. This house. Sophia. After Catherine, he stopped. Started again. After Catherine, I got very good at managing things so that feelings were something I could put somewhere else until I had time for them. And I don't think that was wrong, necessarily. I think I had a little girl to raise and a company that wasn't going to run itself, and I did what I could. He looked at the coffee. But I made a habit of it. And habits are only useful until they're not. Elena listened. She did not rush to fill the space. This was one of the many things he was only now cataloging that she had always done. She listened the way people listen when they are genuinely interested in what someone else is saying, not assembling their response while the other person speaks. I want you to stay, Marcus said. Not the way you've been staying. Not invisibly. He exhaled. Sophia needs you. I can see that now. But more than that, you deserve to be in a house where your presence is named, where it's acknowledged, where you are not managed away by someone who felt threatened by how much my daughter trusts you. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, what does that look like? Practically. Marcus looked up. For the first time since he'd sat down, something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, but the shape of one. I was hoping you'd ask that, he said, because I wrote some of it down. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a folded piece of paper, the document from the kitchen table the night before. He slid it across to her. Elena unfolded it slowly. She read. Her eyes moved down the page in silence. At one point she stopped, went back, read something twice. Marcus watched her. Elena refolded the paper along its original lines. She set it flat on the table. She looked at it for a moment and then looked at him. You wrote member of this household, she said. Yes. Not employee. No. She pressed her palm flat against the paper. Not accepting it. Not refusing it. Just touching it the way you touch something real to confirm that it is real. Raphael would need time to understand, she said. He'll be suspicious. He thinks people with money always want something. People with money usually do, Marcus said. Tell him I want nothing. Tell him I already have what I needed. Elena looked at the window. The east light had moved since they sat down, the kitchen measuring the morning in its particular way, unhurried. She was quiet for long enough that Marcus thought she might not answer at all. Then she said, Sophia doesn't know about the donation. No, Marcus said. It should stay that way. Her voice was firm. She's 8. She doesn't need to carry that. She doesn't need to feel like she owes me something. I agree, Marcus said. Completely. Elena nodded once, to herself, the way she settled something internally. Then she wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, and she said, simply, all right. One word. It was not a dramatic word. It did not arrive with ceremony. but it held inside it everything that had been building across 5 years: every folded dish towel, every early morning, every silent act of care extended into the dark without expectation, and it carried the specific weight of a woman deciding, for the first time in a long time, to let herself be seen. Outside, a garden bird landed on the windowsill. It sat there for a moment, cocked its head at the kitchen, and flew away. The east light continued across the floor. 3 weeks later, Sophia came home from school and dropped her bag at the door with the usual operational thud. She went to the kitchen, always the kitchen first, and found Elena at the counter chopping herbs for soup, and Raphael sitting at the table with a cup of tea and a newspaper folded to the crossword, his cane hooked over the back of the chair. He had moved into the small garden cottage at the end of the property while his rehabilitation appointments were being arranged, because it had a ramp and level floors and a view of Catherine's planted wall, and Marcus had said the cottage sat empty 9 months out of the year, and empty rooms were a waste of a good house. Raphael had been suspicious. He had asked 3 questions, each more pointed than the last. Marcus had answered all 3 without flinching. Raphael had thought about it for 2 days. Then he had packed a bag. Sophia stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at Elena and Raphael, and the soup and the crossword, and the particular warmth that a room generates when the people in it are comfortable with each other. "What's 7 letters?" she announced, dropping into the chair beside Raphael. "For a person who helps without being asked." Raphael looked at her over the newspaper. "You just got here." "I read fast," Sophia said. Elena looked over her shoulder from the counter. Her expression was the composed, unhurried expression it always was, but her eyes, which Sophia had been reading since she was 5, carried something different in them now. Something settled, something that had found its ground. 7 letters, Elena said, going back to her chopping. "That's easy." Sophia propped her chin on her fist. "What is it?" "Family," Elena said. Sophia counted on her fingers. Frowned. "That's 6. Elena said. Raphael leaned over and scrawled something in the margin of the newspaper and slid it across to Sophia. She read it. Her face did the slow, full-face smile she had inherited entirely from her mother, the one that started in her eyes and finished at her ears with nothing held back. "That's not a real word," she said. "It is in crosswords," Raphael said with great authority. "Ask anyone." From the hallway came Marcus's footsteps, not the sharp, managed cadence of the man who moved through his house like a man managing a situation, but something slower. Present. He appeared in the doorway with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, and a look on his face that people who had known him before Catherine died would have recognized, though he had not shown it in a very long time. He looked at the kitchen. He looked at all of it. He stood there for a moment in the doorway and just let himself see it. "Is there enough soup?" he asked. "There is always enough soup," Elena said, with the dignified confidence of a woman who has been making soup in this kitchen for 5 years and knows exactly how much it takes to feed everyone in the room, +2. Marcus sat down. Sophia immediately began telling him something complicated and urgent about her school day that required both hands to illustrate. Raphael went back to his crossword with the focused pleasure of a man who has been given time and a good chair and asks for nothing more. Elena moved from the counter to the stove, and the kitchen filled with the smell of herbs and warm stock and the small bright clatter of an ordinary evening assembling itself around people who had earned it. There was no announcement, no ceremony, no formal declaration of how things had changed. Only the quiet, unmistakable evidence of a house that had become, at last, what it was always supposed to be. Sometimes the most important things that happen in a home happen without a single witness. A woman folding a dish towel a particular way because a child once said she liked the flower on the edge. A woman sitting across a hospital bed in a waiting room, signing a consent form for someone else's daughter with a steady hand and no expectation of return. A woman walking through a front door instead of a service entrance, just once, because someone finally thought to hold it open. These are not grand gestures. They are not the kind of thing that gets recorded or reported or remembered in the way that fortunes and decisions and grand announcements get remembered. They are the size of a lavender sachet in a child's pillowcase, the size of a bruise covered by a sleeve, the size of a single word written on a piece of paper, family. But they are the things that hold a life together, the things that hold people together. And the truth about them, the truth that Diana Paris never understood, that Marcus Calloway had to learn the hard way. that Elena Reyes had known in her bones from the very first morning she stepped into a kitchen that was not hers and made it feel like home, is that this kind of invisible work is never actually invisible. Not to the people who matter. Not to the children who watch the adults in the room and learn, from every small act they witness, what love looks like in practice. Sophia learned it from Elena. She will carry it her whole life. It will show up in the way she treats people who cannot give her anything in return, in the way she listens, in the way she folds a dish towel. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Raphael completed his rehabilitation program 7 months after moving into the cottage. The progress was not miraculous. The doctors had been clear about that from the beginning. It was slow, incremental, built one session at a time out of effort and consistency and the particular stubbornness of a man who had always been too proud to give anything less than everything. But it was real. On a Wednesday morning in early spring, he walked the length of the garden without his cane. He did it slowly. He did it once. He looked up at the window where Elena was watching, and he didn't say anything, and she didn't say anything, and the distance between them was filled entirely with the weight of years and sacrifice and the specific grace of a moment that had been paid for in full. Marcus watched from the doorway with his coffee going cold in his hand. He thought about the hospital room. He thought about the folder on the doctor's knee. He thought about all the Tuesdays he had driven to work with his phone to his ear and his house running behind him like a system he trusted without understanding. He thought about what it costs to trust a thing without understanding it. And he thought about what it means to finally turn around. Diana sent a card at Christmas, addressed to Sophia. It was a good card, careful, warm, without agenda. Sophia read it at the kitchen table with Elena beside her and said, "I think she's trying." Elena said, "People can try." Sophia considered this with the seriousness she brought to all complicated things. Then she got a pen and wrote a card back. That was the shape of it. Not a clean ending, not a finished story, because lives don't finish the way stories do, but something repaired, something that had been pulled out of the dark and brought into the light where it could breathe. And Elena, who had spent 5 years making herself invisible, who had learned so early that the world moves more smoothly if you don't take up too much space, who had carried a secret across 22 months and 2 medical procedures and 100 ordinary mornings. Elena Reyes sat at the kitchen table in the east light on a Thursday morning with her hands around a coffee cup that someone else had poured for her, in a house that finally knew her name. Not employee, not the help, not small problem, family. 7 letters. It fits perfectly if you know how to count. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.